Oh, well, I got to sign in to get into realm again. I was going to give me some announcements there, but if I forget them, somebody can bring them up. Now, here's what's going to happen. I'm telling you right now, here's what's going to happen. If this all group leaves right here to head to the young adult class, is that what's going to happen, Brett? Are you teaching a young adult class? Then they will leave. The rest of you are going to come right here. I'm not going to teach a class with y'all like this. We're going to come right here. So you don't have to move now, Aaron. But in a minute, I'll tell you, when we finish and we head to class, I'm going to say, everybody else who's still here, y'all come right here. We're going to talk. All right. You're singing? You're singing. Got it. Potter's Children's Home is in need of food supplies. Items needed include graham crackers, chocolate Pop-Tarts, Raisin Bran cereal, mayonnaise. Please put these items in the lobby under the Potter's sign by March 23rd. The church building in Prestonsburg has been flooded in its basement. It's a concrete block basement. And a group of our guys are leaving here, if the roads permit, at 7:30 Saturday morning to go down there and help clean out that basement. I didn't get a response on how long they plan to work, but they're leaving at 7:30. If you can go, and in the words of Barry Todd, we always get some old folks, we need some young folks. So there you go. If you can go here at the building, 7:30. If I learn that the roads are bad and they can't, if you plan to come, just call me, text me, and I'll let you know if they're still going or not. All the Scotts are down and out with two of them have some flu symptoms, so let's remember the Scott family. Remembering, I saw today Howard McFadden's sister passed away. Let's see, what else did we see on Realm that we need to remember? Anybody remember? Notabond is not going to have the skin grafting. They have covered her hand in a way that she can be treated with medication, and that will continue. And then Roy Calmes went, he fell, and he's back in the hospital. Joe Abernathy fell and probably has a crack on the lower back. I've also been dealing with, many of you have met, I'm sure, Jeremy Sparks. He's a single guy. He comes by, he's married, but he comes here, dark-haired fellow, usually sits over in this area, been coming for a while. His father, about 3 weeks ago, fell, and they didn't find him till 2 to 4 hours later, and he was having a brain bleed. So he's in ICU at UK, been there a couple of weeks. Then 2 days ago, his grandfather, his father's father, fell on the ice and broke 6 ribs. And he is in the same ICU, on the same ICU floor as his son. And so I've been up there to visit with them, keep them in prayer. Jeremy currently is in Bible study, and we're working through some things with him. And this is a way to be involved benevolently and evangelistically with Jeremy. So keep those in mind. Any others that I have forgotten? All right, let's have prayer as we begin. Thank you, God, for the blessing of assembly, even when there are many who can't be here because of the conditions of the roads. We pray and thank you for the safety of those who can. Bless our time together. Give us opportunities, many of these, to study and to learn and to fellowship. And may we be strengthened by being here tonight. Bless those whom we've mentioned and use us for them in any way that we can. Help us to be open to those kinds of opportunities. All this we ask in the name of Jesus, and amen.
Good evening. Not many of us, so sing out. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. Oh my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed. Triumph over me. Yea, let not that way only be ashamed. Yea, let not that way only be ashamed. Oh my God. Shame, let not my enemies triumph over me. Remember not the sins of my youth. Remember not the sins of my youth.
Good evening. On Wednesday night, prior to some of the recent holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, I don't remember which one, but Mike led a class where he was asking people what their favorite verse was and discussed it. The verse that came to mind for me was Romans 8:28. I didn't share it, but it was the one that came to mind. So in New King James, there we go. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Now, the key phrase in this verse is those that love God. Okay, and this phrase implies more than just an emotional affection for God, but also a relationship with him based on a decision to live obedient to his commands and respond to all aspects of this life in accordance with his will. Now, for me, I've normally viewed this verse, the all things portion of this verse, as relating to my response to the trials and tribulations that may come my way. That is, when something bad happens to me, and bad being a subjective definition or view of any particular situation, if I remain true to how God would have me to live, the final result will be good. In this case, good being the definition or viewpoint God would apply to the outcome. So I sort of limited this verse to one of encouragement during difficult times. Now, on that Wednesday night, based on something that somebody said, and I don't remember what, I started rethinking my limited interpretation of this verse. Now, I still believe my original thoughts on this to be true. If I respond to the trials and tribulations in a manner consistent with the way God would have me to live, then the final result will be good, or will be good for me, again, using God's definition or viewpoint. I also acknowledge that it may take me some time before I concur or see that the end result is actually good. That's where faith comes in the time in between. So it occurred to me during Mike's class that evening that the verse actually says all things, not just bad things. So what about when good things happen to us? Again, using my definition of what good means, have I just assumed that these good things that come our way, not sure what to call them, I put as opposite to trial and tribulations, pleasures and good fortune. Can we call that for good things? That these good things that come my way will naturally lead to the work for good outcome that's promised in this verse. So does good not lead to good? But I'm not sure that's going to be the case. It occurred to me that that would not be the case if we miss the "to those that love God" part. Okay? There's a condition, and that's a linchpin in this verse. Can I forget my need to be dependent on God when things are going good and life is easy? Is it possible that the blessings that I might assume come from God could actually lead me to stray further from His will for my life? Actually, not the good that He intends for me. Is it more likely to have this result if I credit my own efforts for these good things, or I think it's something that I deserve? Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing inherently bad and of itself in achieving or obtaining the good things offered in this life. You know, it's okay to have a well-paying job, good health, nice house to live in, car to drive, smooth sailing in all your relationships, obedient children, beautiful grandchildren, right? There you go. It's okay for those things. The problem comes when we obtain these things either by living outside of how God would have us live, or because of these things, we no longer feel the need to live according to God's will for us. So what I think is good might not lead me to what God thinks is good for me. All things, going back to the verse, all things, whether we view them as good or bad, will work for our good when, and only when, we love God and live according to His purpose in our lives. If we accept this as true, then we must accept the opposite as well. If we do not love God and do not strive to live according to His purposes, even if we desire to live a good life, as man may define it, then these same things will not work for good in our lives, but instead will work for evil. That is, drive us further from how God would want us to live. Some of you here, or those participating online, are going through some really difficult times, probably enduring things that many of us are unaware. Hopefully others of our numbers are going what we might consider some of the good times in your life. Things are going good. Most of us are probably falling somewhere in between. So regardless, this verse tells us that maintaining our love for God and striving to live according to His will, regardless of our current circumstances, will lead us to the outcome that will be best for a child of God, which we are striving to be. So by way of invitation, I hope these few words will help you keep your eyes on the goal to live as God would have us live. If you have not yet committed your life to God, we are here to help you begin that journey this evening. If you have begun that journey, but the cares and temptations of this world have caused you to stray from the good God desires for you, let us help you and pray on your behalf. However we can help you, please come forward and let that need be known as we stand and sing.
The fountain free, 'tis for you and me, let us taste, oh, taste who is free. 'Tis the fountain of wealth from the source above, and He bids us all freely drink. Will you come? Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? There's a living well, and its waters swell, and eternal life they can give. And we joyful sing, ever spring, oh spring, as we haste to drink and to live. Will you come? Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me. Thirsty soul, hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all. There's a rock that's cleft, and the soul is left, that may not its pure water share. 'Tis for you and me, and its stream I see. Let us hasten joyfully there. Will you come? Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me. Thirsty soul, hear the welcome call. 'Tis a fountain open for all.
I'll order some. You can try. You can try. That one bad hand, I'll hold on. Great little book. If you want a copy of it, let me know. I'll order a few. I think you'll enjoy it. Good book. Good book. Just out of curiosity, I don't know even how much they are, but let me see if it's on here. I don't see a price on here at all. I don't know. Did somebody, Kim, did you take a picture of this, or did Carrie? Okay. It's called Forgiven, Forgiving, and Free by Dan Winkler. Okay. Well, I'm going to see how many. If you think you might want this little book, I can't imagine it's $10, but I can call Dan. He's a friend of mine. I'll call Dan. If you think you might, just out of curiosity, so I can have a concept of how many I should order, how many of you might be interested in one of these? I'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll order about 20 of them. We'll see. I'll call Dan. How much? 10? That's what I was thinking. So I'll call Dan. I'll take care of it. I led singing for him for 2 years while he was the preacher. So I put up a lot with him, so maybe he owes me something. We'll see. All right. Justified, forgiven. And we're going to talk, we've been talking about, since we've been justified, we need to be forgiving people. And we talked about forgiving ourselves. Tonight we're going to talk about forgiving other people. Now, the story doesn't relate exactly, but there's a principle here that I do want to begin with. I was waiting to have my oil changed at Walmart, which is half the price of going to Valvoline, but you have to wait. But that's okay, because I'm sitting there with this woman, and she's highly upset. She's been there over an hour, and she's really agitated. We started talking, and she found out she wanted to know what I do, and I told her I'm a preacher, and she said, oh. And and her upset came out of her mouth in language. Didn't bother, because she turned to me and she goes, well, I just want you to know I'm a pagan and I'm proud of it. Okay, pagan. Well, I didn't do this. I said, I'm going to put in, here's the principle that I want to give you tonight for the study, the way we're going to study. When you get in those kind of situations, don't run. Just use it as an opportunity. In my head, I'm going to learn some stuff. I want to know, what does that mean? What do you mean that you're a pagan? And she just began talking, and she said, I believe that this earth is our goddess, and we worship it, and it brings us life, and it's just wonderful. And I said, well, how did it get here? And she said, well, I believe all of these elements and all of these things came together and produced all this. And where did they come from? Well, she said, now that's the part I ain't figured out yet. Here's the principle. When you have a disagreement with somebody, I don't care what it is, doesn't matter. If you want to have a good discussion, begin finding common ground. And then it calms it down enough that you can talk. So I asked her, or I talked with her, and she said, I'm pagan because Christian people I know, they're the worst people around. I said, I understand what you feel. I understand that. There are bad Christians, there are bad pagans. I mean, that's how they are. I said, I said, you talk about this earth thing. Do you believe in science? Oh, yeah, I believe in science. Well, that's good. So I'm glad. I just want you to know I'm a Christian, and I believe in science too. That got her. How can you believe in science, kind of thing? And I said, do you like to read? She said, oh, I love to read all the time. Great. So I got her email, and we started a discussion online. And I sent her my tract out there on the 6 principles of science that evolution, Darwinian evolution, denies, and that Christianity supports. She wrote back, I don't know that I agree with everything, but it is interesting. I said, that's great. I like to learn even if I'm wrong. So what did you not agree with? And this was the last communique until I do some study. She said, have you ever heard of the Sumerians? Well, that's an ancient peoples. I think Egyptian. Don't know much, if any. So I'm going to study a while, try to figure out where is this coming from. Her point of, as you probably know, paganism is a new age feel. It's all about the physical, the here and the now, the do whatever you want to do. And she said, now you're not going to like it, but I worship a goddess. I said, okay. And she said, but now you're not going to like this either because we also have a God. I said, really? She said, yeah, he's got 2 horns. I said, how is that different from Satanism? Her next words were, oh, Lord, different. In my head, I'm thinking, look what you just did. She can't get away from it. Nobody can. Satanism is so different from paganism, she said. It's all the same. It's all inspired by the self. We're going to stop there because that has nothing to do with the lesson. But the point that it does is points of agreement from which you then can have discussion. That's the message I want to leave with you tonight. So, where do we have a disagreement when it talks about forgiving others? Well, here is what I think. The disagreement we have when we talk about forgiving other people is, when do we forgive them? So, some people say, God wants me to forgive when they repent or when they ask for it. And others say, no, I'm supposed to forgive whether they repent or ask for it at all. And there are Christian people that will use the Bible to support both of those. We're not going to find disagreement, point 2, on these areas. 1. In fact, look at Mark chapter 11, verse 25. We're going to use this couple of words in here. He does in the book, I think, very well. He calls attention to 2 words. Whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. You see, you hear the 2 words? Jesus said, anything and anyone. Now, those are 2 universal terms. Just exactly what Ken said tonight. All things. That's universal. Ken must be teaching. I was going to say, number 1 is great, and I have an idea for him. He talking about the good. How many of you, in your head as believer, a lover of God, had a design in your head that I want to find a spouse, and that would be a good thing, right? That God works to be good in your life. So when he said, I've always thought about it in negative terms and not positive terms, that was eye-opening to me. I love what he said, because even in the good things, God works through good things. So that's an idea that I wanted to give him about a spouse. That's a good thing that I wanted, and it worked good. So he's right on that. And this verse says, anything and anyone. Now, I must be willing to forgive anyone of anything. That's what the verse says. We can't disagree. We can't disagree on the verse because of what it says. Now, we can disagree on the timing. That's where the problem is. Number 2, we must forgive so that we can be forgiven by God. That's what the verse says. Nobody would say, no Christian person who even believes that their timing can be different, that person, that Christian, will never say that I can't be forgiven because in my time they haven't repented, so I haven't forgiven them yet. But God's still going to forgive me. How would they say that? It's not what the text says, unless it's about timing. Luke 6, we have to forgive to be like our Father. That's what the text says, verse 37. If I want to be like God, I got to be a forgiving person. And number 4, I want to forgive, and I must forgive because I want people to forgive me. Not just God, I want people to forgive me. James 2 and verse 8, you know, you love somebody else like you love yourself. Love your brother that way. If I want to be forgiven, that's how I have to treat them. And so we're not going to disagree on these things. We all agree. Now, maybe there's a timing issue. And that's what we need to talk about, I think. So, point 3. I'm in the middle of writing this and putting it together, and I switched everything under A and put it under B, and everything under B and put it under A, and didn't take the stuff on A and B, so the words are wrong. Just so you know, for you English people. A should be, one word is apoluo, and another word is aphiemi. Now, the word apoluo and the word aphiemi are two words that are used for the word or translated forgiveness. It is. There's no doubt about that. And we have to be able to understand what he's saying by the use of these words. So, I believe what I did was I switched the two words improperly. I am trying to remember. I think the apoluo is the word that goes with points 1 through 6. And here is what it says. Send away, leave, forgive. Send away. It's used by God when the devil left Jesus after tempting him. He left. He's gone. Send away, apoluo. Jesus left the crowds that he had been preaching to, Matthew 13 and 36. He left. They were over there. He went over there. Send it away. And it's also used for forgiveness. That's this word. Now that gives me a chance to make sure I'm telling you right here. Because in the midst of all of that, back up. In the midst of all of that, in switching those things, I think I may have switched the verses, but we will see right quick. This great site that I hope if you like going back and considering the original language, Bible Hub is something that you ought to jump into. It's just fun, fun, fun. All right. Yep. Let's see here. Nope, I got them right. Amazing. I got them right. So, aphiemi is the first one. Send away, leave, forgive. Now notice point 6. The key to understanding this word is that we send away from us what we are able to send away. Now that's important. The devil was able to leave, so he did. Jesus was able to leave the crowds, so he did. So the word means to send away what you can or able to send away. Now look at the other word, apoluo. This word means to release, to set free, to dismiss, to forgive. Matthew 1:19, when Joseph learned that Mary was pregnant, he wanted to send her away. It is the word used in Matthew 5 twice for the word divorce. In fact, it is used many times for the word divorce. I didn't find this other word ever used for divorce. Luke 6 and 37, it's used therefore for forgiveness. Now look at point 5. The key to understanding this word is that we release or set free that over which we have control. Now, this is where you're probably going to want to say a few things. So here you go, Steve. You want to hold that for a second? Well, we can pass it back and do it well. You want to do this one, Dave? You can stay where you are. I'll tell you when you need to go. You don't have to leave your materials there. All right. Notice what we're saying. When this passage of Mark 11:25 says you forgive anything from anyone, he cannot mean you release or send away that over which you have no control. You don't have any control. How can you send it away? How can you release it? How can you get rid of it? You don't have any control over it. Not possible. So on the back, here is the point. And this is what we'll talk about for a few minutes. Here's what we need to know about these words. Forgiveness means first that I send it away from me. To help us understand it. Speak it, gone. I forgive you. I tell you, I forgive you. When the man that wrote this book, when he and his family went to the jail to visit the daughter-in-law that had just murdered their son, they looked through the bars and said, "We forgive you." That's one of the reasons this guy has a right to write this book. He can write it because he's been there. He spoke it. Number 2, it means that I release it from me. Think it gone. To forgive, what Jesus is saying is, I have to be willing to say, I forgive you. And that's me speaking it gone. But that's not the hardest part. The harder part is to think it gone. In other words, how do I not dwell on it? How do I not hold on to it? How do I get over it? Because I have to think that it is gone. He had a couple of thoughts in here that I underlined that I thought were really neat to hear. We have to forget the something that was done to us and not the someone that did it. In other words, just because you have that person's image in your head or that name, or you have to interact with them at work, doesn't mean that you have failed to forgive it because they're still in your head. It means that you've put what they've said out. That's what you can control. You can say, I'm throwing out what you said from my head. But maybe you can't get rid of the person's name. That's the part that takes a while. Get it out of your head. I like what he said about this child who, in quoting the Lord's Prayer, put it this way: Lord, forgive us our trash baskets as we forgive those who put trash in our baskets. That's really good. He said, it's hard to give the fragments of your heart to the one that broke it. That is really good. He makes the point in here that because of how God talks about forgiveness, he is admitting that it is hard. If we didn't have a problem because we want to hold on to things and it's hard to turn loose, then he wouldn't have had to spend so much time advising us how to do it or that we need to do it. And so by the fact that you and I might have a hard time getting over it, doesn't mean that we're messing up, that we're violating what Jesus wants, because it's very difficult. We have to admit that. To be unforgiving is to be unforgiven. That's really good. Now, got a few more things to say. I want your thoughts after these two things. If I understand forgiveness properly, I can forgive anyone of anything, meaning that I can send away and release from me the thoughts that can clog my mind by holding on to the offense. I'm not sending away the person's guilt because I do not have control over that. Only God does. Now, if I understand forgiveness, God never told me to forgive sin. That's His job. I can ask in behalf of someone who wants to be forgiven that God forgive them. We see that a lot. But God is the one who takes away the sin. I don't have the ability to do that, nor do I have the right to do that. So when He's talking to me and to you about forgiveness, it seems to me He's talking about me sending away in the tribulation, the trial, the chaos, the problem, the event, within that, the part that I can control. Get rid of that. Then I have to recall Ephesians 4. Be angry, but do not what? Sin. You can be angry without sinning. In fact, I read a book in my office, really good. The person made the point that anger is a gift from God. Makes sense. God has anger. He has wrath. Romans 1 teaches that. That's His gift to us. Because anger helps you to understand that some things are wrong. And some things we ought to be bothered by. It's just odd that things can be. I watched a documentary called The Cult of Cats or something like that. And over time, this woman, cult leader, got all of her followers up to about 200 or so to believe that by rescuing cats, they were saving themselves. Have you seen that? What's going on? That's just so strange. But what was also going on, she was intentionally splitting up families. She intentionally create wedges because then she could get the wives to sue their husbands to get the money. And she became a multi-millionaire, which, by the way, you know where she lives now? Started out in Bellingham, Washington. She's now in Columbia, Kentucky. Her name is Cheryl Ruthven. You can look her up. Cheryl Ruthven. That makes me angry. She claims to be a preacher, and she's splitting up families intentionally, causing husbands and wives to divorce. Makes me angry. But not being angry about those things would mean that I'm not like God. I need to be angry about that. But I have to handle it right. And so what I think these verses are saying is I am tasked with putting out of my head the offenses of others so that I don't dwell on it, think about it, meditate on it, and it grows like a cancer inside. And I have to convince myself that by separating myself from that event and getting it out of my head and not holding anger and a grudge anymore, I have to convince myself that that does not mean that they didn't sin. It doesn't mean that they should not be dealt with as though they are sinners, because they are. It doesn't mean that that there's nothing standing against them, because it still is until they handle it. But this is for my spiritual good. That's what he's saying. This is for my spiritual good that I release it. Now, what thoughts do you have along that line? Anybody? What do you think about it? Go.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about, you see a lot on television where there's kids that's missing. I cannot imagine my kid being missing for 20 years and I have no idea where they're at. But on the flip side of that as well, that's one of those things that, once again, you have to leave it in the hands of God. He knows all things. So for me, it would be like, I know that I have to forgive it, but still at the same time, I'm still dwelling on that situation, because the more I dwell on it, the more it's going to consume me. But yet, if we don't forgive it, that power is still there in that situation. Not even looking at my kid missing, but even if something happened to my brother, my sister, whatever, you still have to forgive that individual, because if not, that situation still has the power and the control until you forgive that situation. But until then, it's there.
Hey, the part that you said there is a valuable thing for all of this, because let's take it to an absolute offense. You know, Aaron is this mean, ugly, nasty dude right here. I don't know if y'all know him, but this is who Aaron is. And so Aaron just absolutely out and out offends me, calls me all kinds of names, puts my name out in the public, and just desecrates me, puts me down, and I say, Aaron, I'm forgiving you. If I don't, yeah, that stuff's out there. But if I hold on to it, even if I don't ever see Aaron again, he still is controlling me. He is still controlling me, because it's consuming my thoughts. It's clouding my judgment. It keeps my emotions stirred up. But if I say, I'm over it, and just let it go, then I'm helping me. I haven't said that Aaron didn't do anything wrong. What I've said is, I'm not going to be involved in it with you anymore. Because the more I keep it in my head, the more I'm involved in it with that person. And I appreciate that's a part that I wanted to bring out. That's exactly right. And on that program that I was talking about, one of the families that she broke up, the wife and the children left him without him knowing it, because they were separated. And he has not seen his children in 15 years. Didn't know where they were until recently. But he has to have a forgiving heart to be able to move on, even though you miss them, even though you know something's not good, even though, you have to protect yourself. That's exactly right. Anybody else? What do you think about this idea? Right here, Dave, or Steve, you can do it.
Well, about 6 months ago, I was dropping my daughter off at her at her mother's farm, and they got a lot of dogs there, and a big pack of dogs just came and attacked me, and I got attacked, specifically bitten by a Great Pyrenees.
Ooh.
That thing's the size of a small horse.
I was going to say, it's a big one.
Yeah, it's a. I was considering having, you know, I was gonna try to move forward with like a lawsuit or something, but I don't know. I just dropped the whole thing because I'm just like, you know, it really isn't worth it, you know. And I mean, like, if you can like move on from it, you should. One thing I've noticed also and wanted to point out. Yeah. I think it was the thing that that really got me to do that was just I was reminded of the verse of where Jesus says about if someone takes your coat, offer them your shirt too, and it's done for purposes of exposing their own wickedness.
Very good.
But one thing I also want to point out is that, like, this is really like the reason why it's so popular and so trendy to just dog at Christianity in like the mainstream. You notice that? Because we're the only ones that don't throw a fit over it. We're the only ones that are just like, okay, go ahead. I don't care.
Good point.
But go ahead and make fun of any other religion and see what happens to you.
There you go. Yeah. I give you a reading assignment if you haven't read it in a while. From tonight, read 1 Corinthians 6. Because there, Paul tells the Corinthians, you should rather be defrauded than to sue your brother. He's specifically talking about brethren, one who tries to sue another. And he says, why would you air your dirty laundry in front of the public? Can't you find people in the church who will adjudicate that situation? But he said, if you can't, wouldn't you rather be defrauded yourself than to do that to the Lord's church? So yes, you're right. It is true that there are times where we just drop it because it's the right thing to do. But again, it's not easy. I mean, anybody can say the words, I forgive you. But it takes a while to quit thinking about it. David, right there behind you.
I was just going to share the reading for today on Power for Today.
Oh.
In that was Luke 7:36-50, but it's talking about the story of where Simon the Pharisee invites Jesus in for a meal, and the sinful woman comes in with the vial of perfume and puts it on Jesus' feet, and she's weeping the whole time and kissing his feet, and of course Simon is like, if Jesus was real prophet, he'd know who this woman was and wouldn't do it. But then he tells the story about the one that owed a lot of money, and then one that didn't owe so much, and then the master, forgave them both. And it's like, which one do you think, is more thankful or more, and of course it's the one that owed a lot more. And so the closing part on that was, for this reason I say to you, her sins, which are many, have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. So it all stems from love.
Good.
And if we truly have love for others,
Yep.
we're going to forgive more.
And certainly the attitude ought to be that I want to forgive. Not that I don't want to forgive you. I want to. I may not be able to do it today or tomorrow. But if I want to, then I'll say it. I want to forgive you. And I can even go one step further. I forgive you. But it might take me a while. Once I speak it gone, it might take me a while for me to think it gone. And that's okay. Now, you alluded to the story. You talked the story. He does it in his book as well. And he uses the Matthew 18 version of the same story about the one who owed a lot. He said something I didn't even notice. He said, remember, it was the one servant, the master, he owed the master 10,000 talents. And he said in the book, it only took 3,000 talents to build the entire Solomon's temple. And this guy owed his master 10,000 talents. 3 temples How long would it take to pay that back? Never would. And he says, and that's where this on the paper there down at the bottom.
Just real quick, I was thinking about something as well. But when we do that as Christians, just imagine the opportunity that is for those that are looking at us.
Good.
As God. Because if we glorify God in that type of way, to those that are weaker Christians or those that are on milk, to those that don't even know who God is, if they can say, look at them, look at that individual for what they've done, just imagine the testimony that is.
I'm about to use a political word, but just understand I'm using it as an example. When Donald Trump was shot at, how powerful would it have been for him to say, this was wrong, but I forgive that individual? How powerful would that have been? Yeah. He'd have gotten slandered too a lot because people don't want that. But if we can be those kinds of people, here's what he says. In that story, the first servant was pardoned. But then he went out and put his servant in jail because he only owed him a little bit of money. And he had to go back and plea his case. But the punishment came because he didn't forgive when he was forgiven. And then he gives me 3 words, 3 conditions for forgiveness. If I'm going to be a forgiving person using that story, I have to be a person of patience because it's not easy to do this. I have to be a person of compassion. Put myself in that person's shoes. How would I want to be treated? Because I've messed up and you've messed up. And how would I want to be treated when I mess up? Do I want someone slandering me everywhere? Do I want someone trashing my name? Do I want someone looking at me in a terrible way and in public showing disgust? Then why would I? And mercy. Mercy is you don't get what you deserve. Can I be a merciful person? Here's the final thing. Well, back up to A. If you go and read Matthew 18, the passage about going to your brother when there's something against him and then take one, then go to the elders, that thing, he said there are 2 points. You agree first, and then you're gathered. His point is you talk to the person with whom you have a problem, and then you gather with people who will help you deal with that problem. Maybe it can't be, but from your part you can. Then I like this last thing he put in the book. Forgiveness is a chance to change the past. And he tells the story about Abraham Lincoln. His nemesis was Edwin Stanton. Called him a pig, I think. He called him, let's see, I think he said on here, I thought he said he called him a gorilla and a clown. He was running against him for president. And when Lincoln won, he took Stanton and made him the Secretary of War. Everybody goes, he's your enemy, why would you do that? And he was the one that said the famous words when President Lincoln died. He was standing there and he said, he now belongs to the ages. And his point is, when I can stand with someone and forgive them, it's me saying, now they belong to the ages. And he says, forgiveness is a chance to change the past. Now, if I leave them to the ages, that doesn't mean it's all done, because God will still deal with it. But it means that I'm not going to deal with it. I'm finished. I'll let God take over. Because if I, in my anger and in my frustration, try to deal with it, I'm taking God's job. Because I cannot send the guilt away. Don't take God's job. Just do your job and say, you're forgiven, and move on. All right? Good stuff. Just as a hook for next week, this book closes with the title, Forgiving God. Whoa. All right.